Hello, everyone, and welcome into your Saturday night here on WLS AM 890. It is Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos. You can follow me on socials at Joey Sports Guy. It's the end of the summer coming up. I got a lot of different musings from Chicago Bears Hard Knocks to the Bears preseason in general, talking Caleb Williams, Chicago Bears all-time quarterback hot streaks, and also going to fit in a little Cubs conversation. It's a great episode to get you through your Saturday night. Let's get to the episode right now. Okay, here we go. I want to start our episode by talking about Hard Knocks Episode 3. I'm in love. What can I say? The Episode 3, I think, was the best of the season thus far. And for Chicago Bears fans, look, we're not exactly getting the keys to the castle, but we are getting insight and a look that even 1920 Football Drive, for those of you that like to watch it on YouTube, I think it is a step above that. And I think Hard Knocks is doing a great job. I don't know about you guys, but as a Bears fan, I'm just enjoying the personal ritual of it all. Tuesday comes around and like, oh man, my show is back. Let's get the popcorn ready. I don't know, whether you're watching it on cable, whether you're watching it right as it streams at 8 o'clock Central Time, or whether you're waiting to come home after a long day of work to just kick back and watch your Chicago Bears, watch a little Caleb Williams in slow motion. I mean, this is honestly, for guys and for girls that are Bears fans, this is our Bridgerton. We want to see them fall in love. We want to see them get along. We want to see unlikely pairings, unlikely friends, it all coming together. It's really been a great show so far. I did find it really interesting for those of you that possibly follow CHGO, Adam Hogue, Greg Braggs, and the crew. My former Bears defensive end, and one of my co-hosts, Corey Rooney, hopped on with the executive producer of Hard Knocks, and she did confirm that George McCaskey and the McCaskey family put the kibosh on swearing. There is no swearing on this season of Hard Knocks. You haven't seen it in the first 3 episodes. You're not going to see it in the final 2 episodes or the final 3 episodes moving forward. I find it to be interesting. I mean, personally, is it something that is so lacking in the show that it really changes my enjoyment of Hard Knocks? No, it's not. Do I like to see the clips of Rex Ryan ripping off a sailor streak of curse words in a row? Yeah, it's pretty fun, but I also enjoyed him having a bowl of candy on his desk, which we don't really see anymore in NFL locker rooms anymore. So times change, they evolve. I don't want to see Hard Knocks do that for every single season, but it is funny and it is in line, and it continues to give just a little bit of a peek of a window into the McCaskey family, that there is no cursing, there's no swearing allowed. Couple other thoughts about the episode. We will get to Caleb Williams in just a moment. I did really enjoy that they featured Tory Taylor. Again, a lot of people on draft night when Tory Taylor was taken 4th round pick, the punter out of Iowa, I think a lot of eye rolls happened. I think it was really easy for quote unquote football analysts to give the Bears a hard time for wasting a 4th round pick on a punter. I could just tell you what I saw with my own eyes covering the Big Ten last year. This dude is legit. When we talk about Iowa being a pain in the butt, when we talk about Iowa's defense, and when we talk about Iowa's offense and the type of game that they like to play, they love playing those 13-7 games. You know, if you're a betting fan, you're always betting the points under when Iowa plays anybody. We could talk about those elements all we want, but one of the biggest keys was Tory Taylor's punting on Iowa last year. The dude was an absolute machine when it came to pinning the opposition inside the 10, inside the 20. The hang time's fantastic. And it was a huge reason why Iowa was successful. And it's a huge reason why I don't think Iowa is going to be as successful this year, because it's just really hard to replicate Tory Taylor, who's one of the best punters in America. So you're asking yourself, what does that mean for the Chicago Bears? Well, what we've seen in Hard Knocks, specifically guys like Shane Waldron, on tape saying, you guys got to check out this Tory Taylor guy. He's almost like some sort of comedian on YouTube. Have you seen this guy? Have you heard this song? It's Tory Taylor. I mean, Shane Waldron is enamored. And the reports that you've heard out of camp are that not only does Tory Taylor punt the ball high and far like every other punter, but he does it in different ways. He puts different kinds of spin on the ball with each punt. And he's been deadly accurate. We've seen it in the preseason, and also you've seen witness accounts on Hard Knocks talking about him in practice. This can be a huge element for the Chicago Bears moving forward. It's the end of August. The season hasn't started. I know we will get to the meat and potatoes when we talk about the Chicago Bears, but when you want to talk about some of the unsexy details, some of the things that I like to hammer into when we talk about offensive line with the Chicago Bears, if Tory Taylor can be the type of guy that can pin the defense back and give pin the offense back and give the Chicago Bears defense something to work with in the back of the end zone with the quarterback taking a 5-step drop and he's already on the 2-yard line. Those are the types of advantages that can really turn seasons around and can help you win maybe some games that you aren't supposed to. When you're talking about a rookie quarterback, when we've talked about quarterbacks that maybe have inferior talent to Caleb Williams or maybe not as high of a prospect ceiling and the hype that we're hoping from Caleb Williams, I mean, we know it very well as Bears fans. You got to give the rookie quarterback a short field. Well, how do you do that? First thing you do is you have a punter that can pin them back inside the 10, inside the 5, even inside the 15 is fine. And then the defense goes to work. By the time it's 4th down, their punter is now punting from the end zone, and you're getting the ball at midfield. 2 first downs, and you're kicking a field goal. Hopefully, that's the type of element that Tory Taylor can bring to the table, and it's the type of thing that they're featuring at Hard Knocks. I've watched almost every single Hard Knocks, and I can't think of one Hard Knocks where they featured the punter. And yet, Tory Taylor, the Australian, he got some good run. He got some good time. My final thought on the Hard Knocks episode, and this is just a general thought that I don't really know what to make sense of, but maybe it's going to lead into this next section here when we talk about Caleb in general in the preseason, is that Hard Knocks does a really good job of not only highlighting some of the players and their storylines, but once you start watching that slow motion a little bit, it does start to paint the picture where you can wrap your head around whoever they're covering, that team is going to be good that season. You hear some of the coach speak of them talking them up. You see some of the plays where they make a correction and then it works, and then you start saying to yourself, man, maybe this team is going to be good this year. When it comes to Hard Knocks, that is not always the case. There have been plenty of moments, plenty of seasons where Hard Knocks covers a team and they come out and they are god-awful. But I got to tell you, watching this Hard Knocks Chicago Bears, I am having a hard time holding myself down to not thinking that this Chicago Bears team is going to be really good this season. They're in a tough division. I get it. There's a middle of a season stretch. There's a 3-game road trip. They go to London. A lot of different challenges along the way. You can easily lose some of these football games that right now on the schedule look like wins. But as it stands right now, the biggest difference from just watching the team on Hard Knocks and Caleb Williams is that this team looks ready to play. And that's a testament to head coach Matt Eberflus. We're going to give credit to the players all season long, but for right now, I do think Matt Eberflus deserves a lot of credit. I've been very critical of Matt Eberflus in the past, from the moment that he got hired. My rationale at the time was a bit of a restaurant analogy, if you will. I always thought Matt Nagy was kind of like the Guy Fieri of coaches, right? He did the thing where he came in and he talked a great game. He was coming from an incredible offensive system, the genius offensive coordinator, Matt Nagy. And he said, I'm going to take nachos and I'm going to put pulled pork on top of it, and I'm going to top it with frosting. You sound like that sounds insane, but when you taste it, it's going to taste really, really good. And I got to admit, Guy Fieri's concoctions are pretty tasty and pretty interesting, even though they are a little convoluted and a little off the beaten path. So what happened after a couple of years of ingesting that type of food? It was sugary. It was high. Matt Nagy's offense was high on calories, empty calories, if you will. There was a lot of smoke and mirrors. He got too cute at times, calling different kinds of plays, got in his own head, and eventually we had to bend over because our stomach hurt from watching Matt Nagy's offense. So when Matt Eberflus was hired, I said at the time that maybe Matt Eberflus was that lean chicken and broccoli that Chicago Bears fans kind of needed. Maybe we needed to go a little on a diet on the sizzle factor of a new coach and what he brings to the team. And maybe we need to get back to basics and do kind of the boring old, which, no offense, was Matt Eberflus at the time. Get back to playing defense, hard-nosed football guy. Not going to promise you much, not going to wow you, not a ton of pizzazz, but maybe that's what the Chicago Bears needed. For the first 2 seasons, it wasn't looking great. Granted, talent wasn't good, but on top of that, Matt Eberflus's decisions at times really made me scratch my head. And you can never walk me off of the fact that the Chicago Bears lost 14 games in a row. I don't care what roster Ryan Poles put together. 14 in a row, it was really, really, really hard to watch. And a lot of those games we should have won, and we blew them. We blew 3 10-point leads last season. At some point, some of that's got to push on to the coach. But having said that, the roster obviously has improved. We feel really good about our quarterback. We have a new running back. We loaded up at wide receiver. All the people that we need to have locked up on the defensive side of the ball, from a defensive end to a cornerback, we've done that. We've got a linebacker. Both linebackers are locked up. So the roster is better. And I really enjoy that. Just because the talent is better, it doesn't mean that Matt Eberflus is taking his foot off the pedal of trying to play these guys in the preseason. He learned his lesson from last year. Last year's team was more talented. They won 7 games. Again, they lost some of those close ones in the fourth quarter. But if you go back to that first month of the season, that team was not ready to play. And that team did not play a lot in the preseason. You can tell that Matt Eberflus, not even really looking at some of the things that he had at his disposal when we talk about talent, he said, I'm not making that mistake again. I don't care who you are. You're going to play a little bit in the preseason. And as we've seen, look, you don't want to read too deep into the results, but you have to be honest and objective. The Chicago Bears have been kicking the you-know-what out of teams all preseason. The last 2 have been complete laughers. And whether it is Caleb Williams, Tyson Bagent comes in and carves somebody up. Brett Rippon comes in and carves somebody up. The starters aren't out there, but Terrell Smith is getting an interception. Josh Blackwell looks good. Daniel Hardy is getting sacks. Austin Booker is making plays. These aren't your starters. And they're going out there, and they're kicking butt, and they're taking names. So that's just the honest assessment there. So you have to feel like this Chicago Bears team is better on talent, possibly better at quarterback, possibly better at coach just based on experience and some of the moves that he's made that are different than previous years. And they're playing better in the preseason. You would have to think that this team is ready to roll. So Hard Knocks, you got me, man. I'm pumped up. I'm ready to roll. I'm going to transition here, and we're going to talk about Caleb Williams, because Caleb Williams, nothing makes me want to temper expectations or throw water on a fire more than getting too far ahead of myself when projecting Caleb Williams. But everything else around him right now is trending well. You got to go out there. You got to play the games. But if you're a Chicago Bears fan listening to this right now, you have to feel good about where this organization is heading. And even if they disappoint this season, and whatever your version of disappointment is, I think there are going to be enough positives. They're going to have you really excited for the next 2 or 3 years. There's things inside of me that I want to say, like, I don't know. Chicago Bears could be contending for a Super Bowl in the next 3 years. That's the type of stuff I want to say right now. And it's not based on my blind enthusiasm, but it's based on the things that have happened in the offseason and some of the things that we're seeing come together in preseason, in practice, and on Hard Knocks. It's a good time to be a Bears fan. It's a good time to be a Bears fan because now let's talk about Caleb Williams preseason. Now, just to reiterate, for those maybe coming into the show for the first time here on WLS AM 890, here on Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos, I've been preaching all offseason that I think Caleb Williams has all the talent in the world, but I'm trying to just temper expectations based on historical precedent with past rookie quarterbacks that eventually became Hall of Famers. Some of them had some bumps in the road and didn't play great at times. And I'm just trying to explain to some Bears fans that think Caleb Williams will be the savior versus Caleb Williams is the savior right now. I don't think he has to be. The team is talented enough to cover up some of his problems. And I just want to talk a little bit about what I've seen from Caleb in general in the preseason, what I like a little bit, and then maybe trying to dispel, throw a little water on some of the enthusiasm, but I just think it's good to have a little bit of perspective. So my general take on Caleb Williams this preseason is my hope, my dream, is that this is like listening to the first 20 seconds of your all-time favorite album. This is just the first 20 seconds. Think about it right now in your head, whether you're in your car, whether you're listening at home, what your favorite album is, and try and put yourself back into that place when you first heard that album for the first time, and what that first 20 seconds did to you, and the emotions that went through your body as you listened to it. For me, probably, I don't know if I have like an all-time favorite album. I have one that's pretty dang close, and I'm probably going to go Smashing Pumpkins' Siamese Dream. And for me right now, watching Caleb in the preseason, my hope is this preseason has been like that first drum roll from Jimmy Chamberlain, that first marching band drum roll, and then the guitar starts to kick in. You haven't even really heard the reverb and the fuzz yet, but I distinctly remember listening to that on a cassette at a friend's house. And when that guitar starts kicking, you have that moment in your life where you go, what is this? What am I listening to? What is happening to me? And then that song kicks in, and then the next one, and the next one, and then you're listening to the whole album, and one day you look back and you go, man, that is my favorite album of all time. And that's what we're hoping with Caleb Williams, right, Bears fans? We're hoping that not only is this preseason maybe that first 10 to 20 seconds, but this season is that first great song, and then he just keeps stacking great songs afterwards. No skips in Caleb Williams' career. And maybe perhaps when you look back, you're hoping that he has a ring on his finger. You're hoping that he's perhaps on his way to the Hall of Fame, and you can look back and you go, man, that was one of my favorite albums. And I remember where I was when I heard that first 20 seconds that changed my life. It's only 20 seconds, though. Keep in mind. I'm hoping it's my favorite album of all time, but we all know that sometimes there's certain albums that just play the hits in the beginning and then they peter out, right? We never know. I'd like to think the former, but I always have to represent the latter. So here are the things that I've liked from Caleb Williams so far. Just in the preseason, I'm going to remove the wow plays and all the clips on YouTube and highlights because I think I'm in agreement here. I'm not fighting the mob here that I think those moments have been amazing. But what has been nice that I've seen that has separated himself from other past quarterbacks that I've seen in the Bears system throughout the years, the guys that have given us hope, the guys that we've been praying and thinking, can this person be the next one, is that I just like Caleb's demeanor pre-snap. Dude just seems in control. And I'm not saying that there's other quarterbacks that have looked flustered before, but you can see a little bit, there was a mechanical vibe to some of them sometimes where they just wanted to do the right thing, was like, okay, you could see them literally thinking out loud in their head, okay, I'm going to get the play call. I'm going to get it back to the huddle. I'm going to say it correctly. I'm going to get up to the line of scrimmage, and we are going to hike the ball. Caleb, with everything, it looks pretty smooth. He already looks in control of the offensive line, the line of scrimmage. Whether he's making the right pre-snap calls, I can't say. I don't have that type of film at this time. But the pre-snap operation has looked pretty good. When we talk about some of the things in training camp that we were worried about, some of that was pre-snap penalties, not being on the same page, Caleb's cadence, getting it right, and whether everyone can pick up on it on the offensive line. It's all looked pretty good so far. The little stuff has looked really impressive. I like Caleb's footwork. You can kind of tell, Mitch got a little bit of the happy feet. I thought Justin at times, because he had that long stride, moved a little slowly. Jay Cutler obviously was always throwing off of his back foot. There's a lot of different examples of past Bears quarterbacks where the footwork hasn't been 100%. Caleb, honestly, what I've always said, you just want to see the guy bouncing like he's a boxer, on his toes, upright, balanced. And when Caleb goes back, he's shown that ability, and he's delivered the football with a nice base on a bunch of his throws. I've been very impressed with that. And when you're talking about a rookie, these little things do matter. When the bullets start to fly and these professional defenses start blitzing you, you got to have good mechanics. And so far, it looks like he's been able to do that. I like that Caleb's eyes continuously remain downfield. You can see, if you want to pay attention to several snaps, just watch the C on his helmet and watch it kind of move a little bit to the left and to the right. I think it's been impressive. Now, outside of some of the scramble plays, he's been able to get the ball out quickly on a few occasions. I have liked that. Just get the ball out to your hands, pick up those 4 or 5 quick yards. They've been trying to incorporate Gerald Everett a lot in the preseason, which has been interesting. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the norm, if you will, when the season starts. I am curious to see how some of these play calls translate into the regular season, because you try not to show the opposing defenses anything in the preseason. You want to save it all for when it counts. So what do these routes look like? I'm curious to see how that moves along. And the fact that, back to Eberflus again about getting his guys ready. This last preseason game, I'm on board with everybody else. Those first 3 drives from Caleb didn't look great. But what happens when things don't go well, right? You're on a snap count. You want to get only so much work in, but you want to protect the athlete, so on and so on. Matt Eberflus decided to send the team back out there. They had more to work on. And man, did it pay off. Caleb comes back down, gets a pass interference penalty on a great throw to Tyler Scott. Well, the bummer is we'll never know if Tyler Scott would have caught it because of the penalty. It would have been nice to see him actually come down with it, so you know that that type of thing works on the Tyler Scott end in the regular season. They come down, they get a field goal, then they come back, they get the ball again, and then Caleb comes down, makes 3 amazing plays, 2 of them count, and they get a touchdown and go up 10-3 and go into the half. Gosh, that is so valuable, because that's the reason why those 2 drives, Matt Eberflus pushing it, telling these guys, no, keep working till you get it right. That's the reason why they sat against the Chiefs. And that's why we now have a couple of weeks for the Bears to get ready for week 1 against the Titans. And you know what? They've got some really good film to work off of. Some good confidence, some good momentum. There's always going to be teach tape. No one's ever going to say it's perfect. The idea, I think, in the preseason is find enough stuff that you like that you can build off of so you can move into the regular season. Let's get to it. The flash plays, they're incredible. Dude throws like a shortstop in the hole. Full stride, doesn't slow down, eyes down the field. When he senses the defensive end behind him, he can turn his head really quick, check him out. The slow-mo and hard knocks of him evading the 2 defenders on the touchdown run is absolutely incredible. How low he gets to the ground and then how strong his legs push off for him to get out and roll around the pocket. It's pretty incredible. Coming back here on Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos here on WLS AM 890. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you're having a wonderful Saturday night. We're talking about Caleb Williams, and I was just talking about the amazing flash plays that he's had in the preseason, whether it was, that unbelievable Jordan-esque moving to my left, but I'm also throwing it to my right down to Roma Dunze, whether we're talking about him scrambling, juking out a defender, then throwing in the corner to Roma Dunze, who needs to learn that he needs to stay in bounds, but also what are we doing in the back end zone there, Soldier Field, with some of the paint? Got to help the players out a little bit. And then finally, absolutely incredible, right between the 2 defenders, sees the guy behind him, rolls out of the pocket. Maybe I throw, maybe I don't. Oh, wait, Tevin Jenkins is in front of me. I'm going to follow him all the way to pay dirt. Incredible plays. A lot to get excited about. But again, I teased it in the first segment of the show. I have to throw a little bit of some cold water on that, because of the fact that as a Chicago Bears fan, we've seen the highlight reel quarterback. And his name I shudder to even say his name now, for worried that some people may be triggered. But I'm going to say it anyways, Justin Fields. Justin Fields is a fantastic highlight reel quarterback. You can put together a package of him, a sizzle reel of him, that could stand up against most quarterbacks playing in the game today. It really is something special. He was one of the few players that had me go from a slouched position on a couch to the edge of my seat, to standing up, to cheering, to saying, how did he just do that? And as we learned, just because a player can create those highlight plays, it doesn't mean that it necessarily transitions into the consistency, the mundane, and the boring aspects that it takes to play quarterback in the NFL. And for Caleb Williams, I love the fact that he can scramble and get out of the pocket, because, look, that can be the X factor. That could be the backbreaker of a defense that really just sort of sucks the will away from them and gives you those extra 3-4 plays that can make a difference in a game. But I'll be honest with you, there's a part of me with Caleb Williams that kind of wants the boring stuff. I kind of want Caleb Williams to just sit and thrive in the pocket. Caleb Williams himself has said that he wants to do just that, just sit back and point guard, hand the ball out to different players and have them make plays. I want a Bears quarterback who will consistently lead us on 8-play, 80-yard drives for touchdowns, sitting in there surgically, taking apart a defense and moving the ball down the field at will. A type of quarterback that gets the ball with 1:40 to go and goes, you know what? I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to carve some people up. We're going to get down there. We're going to get points before the half. The scramble stuff, the off-scripted stuff, look, it is great. It is something that not every quarterback can do. So if your quarterback can do it and at a special high level, it can set you apart in the NFL. But if we want the longevity, if we want the type of, I think, the type of quarterback that we've been yearning for our whole lives, I think the boring stuff is going to be an important aspect. And I want to see more of that from Caleb as his rookie season moves along. And honestly, that might be the last to arrive. When we talk about a linear path of a rookie quarterback, when we talk about the ups and the downs, the peaks and the valleys, I think the peaks are going to be a lot of amazing off script. How did he do that? Throw that ball from this angle. What? I don't understand type plays. But I think the stuff, the Tom Brady stuff of just sitting in the pocket and just hitting dudes left and right and having the defense guessing, I think that's going to be the last part. And that's the part that I really want to see from Caleb. And that's why I'm willing to say that I'm incredibly excited about him, but I'm not willing to necessarily crown him as the next great thing, because that's an aspect I really need to see from a Bears quarterback. Because I will tell you this, we do not want another Bears quarterback running for his life. Cough, cough, Justin Fields. We do not want another Bears quarterback we have to roll out and split the field for because he can't read the whole thing. Cough, cough, Mitch Trubisky. We do not want a quarterback in the pocket throwing off his back foot because the offensive line is pressuring in on him and he can't figure out a way to just sit with his base and deliver the football. Cough, cough, Jay Cutler. The qualities that I'm describing is the stuff that I want to see Caleb do regularly. Sit in the pocket, deliver the football. And look, it won't happen overnight. But I say this all the time, and especially when we talked a lot over the last couple of years on my show, previous shows about Mitch, about Justin, is that I think every quarterback goes through this. Every quarterback walks in the NFL with their God-given talent, that innate ability to make plays or win games, whether it is athletically, with their brain, or with their arm. Every quarterback walks into the NFL with something that someone likes that wants to put them on the field. But this is the analogy that I always say, that it's like crossing a bridge. Every quarterback starts at the beginning, and then you have to walk across that bridge, and some of them make it to the other side, and some of them don't. Some of them get caught in the middle, have themselves a pretty decent career, but never get to that other side. That other side is when you're talking All-Pro, Hall of Famer, Super Bowl winner, MVP, and there's only a few select guys that get over there. And how do you cross that bridge? You cross that bridge by identifying and understanding and having a willingness to sit in the pocket and find your second and third read guys. when the first read on the play that the coach draws up, when it doesn't work, you have the ability and the eyes and the patience to look, scan, and find where the weak spots in the defense are to find somebody open. There aren't a lot of guys that figure it out. I would say, has Kirk Cousins 100% figured that out? Is he on the other side of that bridge? I'm not so sure. Is he a quality quarterback that's made millions of dollars and can win you games? Yes. So I'm not saying if you don't cross the entirety of that bridge, you don't make it in the NFL. But I'm just saying, you could take what you want, and I'm going to cut through some of these quarterback Bears heaters that we've seen in history. And a lot of these guys came in with qualities that worked for a little while. Mitch worked for a while. Jay worked at times. Justin worked for a little while, but none of these guys could cross that bridge to learn how to find their second and third read. It was always, if the first read isn't there, I either have to do something athletically or I have to use my arm to shove it through the window as hard as I can, and maybe we're going to get into an interception. And that's the thing that Caleb has got to do. He's got to cross that bridge just like everybody else. There's plenty of quarterbacks right now, Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, even a Dak Prescott. Those guys are still trying to learn how to cross that bridge to get to the other side. And that's the type of thing that I want to see Caleb do. I love the off script. I love the scramble. It's amazing. But Chicago Bears fans, we deserve more than highlights. We deserve consistent results on a play-to-play basis. That's when you know you have a truly great quarterback. I did a fun little exercise of the greatest hot streaks in my Bears lifetime, or at least of the last 25, 26 years. And I just want to ask yourself the internal question, do you think Caleb is capable of any of this stuff, right? And I'll go through them one at a time here. Let's start first with the greatest statistical Bears quarterback of all time, Mr. Eric Kramer himself. Now, as we all know, the Chicago Bears have never thrown for 4,000 yards in a season. Chicago Bears quarterback never thrown for 4,000 yards in a season. Chicago Bears quarterback has never thrown for 30 or more touchdowns. The only person who's ever gotten close to climbing up to that intense Mount Everest, if you will, is Eric Kramer. 1995, Eric Kramer tossing the ball up to Marcus Robinson. It was a beautiful thing. It was also Jeff Graham at the time. It was good stuff. It was a good team. Good season. Honestly, the only great year that Eric Kramer ever had. He threw for 3,838 yards. He had 29 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. Now, he had a 7-game stretch that was fairly impressive. This is what we call the first Chicago quarterback heater that I can remember. And we're coming up on the 30-year anniversary of it next year. In a 7-game stretch, he threw for 19 touchdowns. Only 6 picks, 6 and 7. That's still, it's kind of a lot, even for today's standards. But he also averaged 278.1 passing yards a game. That's pretty good. For Chicago Bears, that's Shangri-La. That's the greatest you've ever heard. Now, there's guys throwing for 5,000 yards. Over 300 yards a game is an easy thing for some of these dudes, but 278, that's a good start for Eric Kramer. That's a good heater. He had 10 games where he had multiple touchdowns, too, as well. If you said to me this season, Caleb Williams has 10 games of multiple touchdowns, I think we're winning a lot of games, right? If Caleb Williams throws for 2 or more touchdowns in a game, you think we got a good shot to win? I do, too. We're setting the bar, and we're moving on. So we're moving on. The next one is obviously Rex. Love him or hate him, baby. When he took us to the Super Bowl in 2006, we can talk all we want about how terrible he was in the Super Bowl. He had an awful last month of the regular season heading into it, played well against the Saints. But people forget that Rex Grossman, he kind of was not just in the Pro Bowl conversation, but he had to have at least been in the top 5 MVP conversation. Because through the first 9 games, if you remember, the Chicago Bears, they were 8-1. They were kicking other teams' butts. Rex, 17 touchdowns in those first 9 games. Again, 11 interceptions in 9 games. That sounds very Rex-like. But in that span of those 9 games, 5 of those games, he had 250 or more passing yards. So you could say what you want about Rex being terrible. Rex was putting up numbers in that offense during that time. And for a 9-game stretch, which is about half the season, Rex Grossman was a quality starting quarterback in the NFL. A dude on one of the best teams in the NFL at the time, throwing touchdowns, scoring points, and probably being a Pro Bowl player at the time. He didn't put it together. He lost the Super Bowl in the next year. He capsized, and that was the end of the story. Enter our guy, Kyle Orton. Now, when you talk about hot stretches, this is what we also would say a bit of a stretch. You know, Orton never really lit it up from a statistical standpoint. He was always kind of, you know, he came in, he didn't throw the ball much, but he won double-digit games as a rookie. Had to come back, kind of fight for his job back. When he did get his job back in 2008, obviously that season, had an opportunity to get to the playoffs against the Falcons, lost that game. Orton did not play well in those last 2-3 games of the year. But again, 5-game stretch in 2008, 10 touchdowns, which is pretty good for Kyle Orton. 4 interceptions, 274 passing yards a game. So that passes the litmus test of kind of what we expect when a Bears quarterback is going well. These are the types of performances that we remember and the types of performances we expect. Kyle Orton, not a bad 5-game stretch there. By the next season, traded to Denver, played well. A couple years later, no longer in the league. Moving on, the Jay Cutler thing. Now, this one was tough because you know what? Jay never really had a heater or a run of games where he played really well for more than a month at a time. I mean, they won a lot of football games with him, and they had Matt Forte, and they were running the football. And I could pull up Matt Forte's stats and show you a couple of heaters from there. But in terms of Jay throwing the football, dominating from in the pocket, delivering the football, there isn't too much to find in his career. I'm sorry. I mean, he had a really great, strong start. The year that they were 7-3, they played at the time the San Diego Chargers. He broke his thumb, was playing really well in that game. The season went down the tubes after that. That definitely could have been a possibility, but I had to go with the 2010 season when they went to the NFC Championship game. He threw 3+ TDs, 3 or more TDs in a game 5 times. So he had 5 monster games for Jay in 2010. He also threw 1 or less touchdown 8 times in the game. So that's classic Bears football right there, right? Hand the ball off, play great defense, win the football game. Who cares about the quarterback? It is pretty incredible to think that we went to the NFC Championship game in 2010, Jay Cutler a quarterback, and we were sacked 52 times. There were at least 4 games I counted where he was sacked at least 6 times. Of course, that Giants game, we all remember he was sacked 9 times. They went to the NFC title game that year. They just could not get that offensive line together for Jay. And who knows, could he have put up better numbers if that offensive line was better, if he wasn't getting sacked like crazy? Guess we'll really never know. A couple years later, I had to throw this in there just because it's fun. Josh McCown went on a 3-game heater in 2013. Obviously, we all remember 10 touchdowns in 3 games. Very impressive. Only 1 interception. In those 3 games, he threw for 352 yards, 355 yards, 348 yards in Mark Trestman's offense. That was a good time in a very frustrating era. The Mark Trestman era was just incredibly frustrating because it was feast or famine, right? The feast was on offense. The famine was on defense. They were so terrible defensively. They were very talented offensively, and you saw it with Josh McCown there, running up some huge numbers in just a 3-game stretch. You want to maybe say is the greatest Chicago Bears quarterback heater of all time? Go for it. But again, only 3 games. Not a lot to work from there. Because this next guy, by the numbers, maybe has the greatest Chicago Bears heater of the last 30 years, and it's Mitch Trubisky in 2018. We all remember it. It is a 6-game heater, ladies and gentlemen. The Tampa Bay game is in there. Him going toe-to-toe with Tom Brady in New England is in there. In that 6 games, he threw 17 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. Of course, 6 of those came against Tampa Bay, but we count them nonetheless. He averaged per game 285.5 passing yards. In those 6 games, he had 4 games of 300 yards plus passing. I mean, if we go back, it's so tough. The 2018 team is like the version of like Right Said Fred. It is Milli Vanilli. It is the number one-hit wonder that you're ever really going to see. And we can't deny the fact that Mitch, for those 6 games, played pretty great. Now, keep in mind, they went on bye. They came back. They played the Rams. He played terrible. He did not play well again for the rest of the season. And as much as we want to say the 6-game heater was the greatest in Chicago Bears history, he put 4 or 5 games together to finish that season that were nothing to write home about. So he was mix and match. I mean, Mitch has a lot of similarities to Rex. There was good Mitch and there was bad Mitch. Good Jay, bad Jay, good Rex, bad Rex. I mean, that happened with Mitch Trubisky. And that 6-game heater, look, numbers-wise, nobody's kind of quite had it like him. Let's play the game. The final one, obviously, is Justin Fields. 6-game stretch in 2022. 6-game stretch, he had 9 passing touchdowns, 7 rushing TDs. So for 16 total scores, 6 games, 5 interceptions in that span. He had 1,027 passing yards, 623 rushing yards, so averaging over 100 rushing yards a game in that 6-game stretch. We all remember that one. That was the Patriots game. That was the Dallas game. That was the Miami game. He averaged 275 all-purpose yards a game. He was electric. He was a highlight reel machine. Bears were must-watch TV at the time, but guess what? They were 1-5. They only won one of those games, and that was that Patriots game. They lost 5 more after this stretch of Justin running for his life, making plays, scoring points. But again, our defense was terrible. And, he made some mistakes along the way, too, with some fumbles and some interceptions. This is what we have to deal with, Bears fans. This is the type of stuff. So when we're looking at Caleb this season, I'm just saying it isn't going to take much. I mean, if you're telling me he puts together a 6-game stretch where he gives us 15 to 17 touchdowns and throws for about 270 yards a game, which isn't much by NFL standards today, you're basically looking at one of the greatest hot streaks the Chicago Bears quarterbacks ever had. Caleb could be capable of more than that. And when you look at these hot streaks, you try and say to yourself, this is why we set the bar low here in Chicago. And that's why, as excited as I am for Caleb Williams and the off script and the off scrambling and all that good stuff, I want to set the standard for Caleb Williams a little bit higher than what we've seen from past Bears quarterbacks, because we deserve it, and I think Caleb Williams is capable of it. We're going to get out of here in just a second here on Sports Talk Chicago, WLS AM 890. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you're having a great Saturday night, or wherever and whenever you're listening to this podcast and this show. I want to get out of here and want to talk about some Chicago Cubs really quickly. Just a couple of news and notes right now, depending on when you are checking this episode. The Chicago Cubs right now are in the middle of a stretch where they really have an opportunity to get back into it and at least get back into making that third wild card. And at the very least, playing some meaningful baseball games with 2 weeks to go in the Major League season. So depending on when you're catching this, they're probably in the about 13 to 12 game stretch. They finished up with the Tigers. They're playing the Marlins right now. They're playing the Pirates for 6, the Nationals for 3, and then they play the Yankees, and then it gets tough again. But they've got a real opportunity here coming up. The Tigers, the Marlins, the Pirates, the Nationals, their combined run differential is minus 275. Those teams combined have been outscored by 275 runs. I mean, this is the time. If it doesn't happen now, it won't happen at all this season. If they play 500 baseball, it ain't happening. They have to honestly play 700 at a 700 clip and really put the hammer down on some of these teams to get back into it. And if they can get 2, 3, 4 games above 500, they will have an outside shot at sneaking into this third wild card. What needs to happen to have it happen? Well, obviously Isaac Paredes, the big trade acquisition for Christopher Morel at the deadline, dealing with some shoulder issues right now, just hasn't hit the baseball since coming over to the Chicago Cubs. He's hit a couple home runs, I get it, but it's funny watching him. I mean, he has a really nice control. It's funny watching him. He has a really nice command of the strike zone. Dude knows what he's doing up there. You don't really catch him swinging at stuff that's out of the zone. You don't really catch him getting fooled too often. The only problem is he seems to be in between or seems to be second guessing himself, because when he's getting pitches to hit, he's fouling them back. And you can just see with the exit velocity, he says he's not really squaring the baseball up. And this is easy pickings, right? Whoever you acquire at the deadline needs to be a difference maker for you down the stretch. So Isaac Paredes just needs to start hitting the ball a little bit. And I think it can help out this lineup that got hot, has cooled off, and now honestly needs to turn the engine back on and heat up once more. Another one, which is an interesting stat that I didn't quite realize, is that if the Chicago Cubs are going to take a run at this thing, Cody Bellinger and Seiya Suzuki, they got to start hitting at the friendly confines. It has not been a great season for either of them hitting at Wrigley this year. And it's been tough too. I can't remember. I'm sure there's statistics out there. I feel like that there's, for whatever reason, the wind hasn't been blowing out quite as often at Wrigley as it has in years past. Typically, we all remember those games where sometimes Jim Edwins would just hit a fly ball in the air on the Cubs and it would just land in the basket. It would just keep drifting and drifting and drifting. It hasn't really seemed like they've gotten that home field advantage, but your two most important hitters, Cody Bellinger and Seiya Suzuki, this is what they're doing at Wrigley Field this season. Cody Bellinger is slashing only .239, on-base percentage .298, slugging .400 at home this season. Seiya Suzuki slashing only .238, almost identical. On-base percentage .338, a little bit better, slugging .423 at home. These guys need to get going on that home cooking. Because, look, it doesn't matter which Cubs iteration or who's on the team at the time. When a Cubs team is great at home and Wrigley is rocking, that can carry you a long way. You got to take care of business at home right now. They're playing a lot of these games at the friendly confines. Obviously, they go to Miami. But there's a real opportunity here. And when you get the chance at Wrigley in front of your home fans to hit Cody Bellinger and Seiya Suzuki, they got to step up. They have to make it happen however they possibly can, because the National League is wide open this year. Holy moly. One of the teams that was a perennial powerhouse playoff team last year, the Atlanta Braves, continue to have injuries. Now it's Austin Riley, their star third baseman, down with a broken hand. If you go around the league right now, there isn't a single team in the American or the National League on pace to win 100 games. That'd be the first time that it's happened in about 10 years. The team with the most wins on pace right now is 95. It is all smushed into the middle. There is no one dominant team right now. And I know what you're thinking. Hey, what about the Dodgers? Okay, great lineup. Don't get me wrong, but man, who's that? Where's that pitching? Is Yamamoto coming back? Gavin Stone's been up and down. Tyler Glasnow's back on the injured list. Is it them? I doubt it. The Phillies, again, great lineup. Zach Wheeler at the top, Aaron Nola at the top. That's good. The back half of the rotation. Do they have what it takes? We'll see. They'll be definitely one of the toughest teams to play. But after those two teams, name me a team that scares you in the National League. And I'm just saying, if you're the Chicago Cubs, look, you haven't really played well all year. The offense has been middle of the pack to terrible at times. Your defense started the season awful. It's kind of sort of leveled off, but they're still making mistakes a little bit. There's a fundamentals issue with this Cubs team that keeps rearing its ugly head. The bullpen started off terrible. It has kind of righted the ship a little bit. They just got rid of Hector Neris, so I'm going to close the show with in just a second. They still got to figure out who their closer is, unless it's going to be matchup based. We'll see what happens. Jorge Lopez looks like he's getting the first knock at it. They brought up Jack Neely, who, guys, if you haven't seen this guy pitch yet, he is 6'8", he is a monster, and he strikes out people. I think he could possibly be a weapon for you down the stretch. He's been pitching really well in AAA since being acquired in the Mark Glider deal with the New York Yankees about a month ago. Your rotation has the goods. You know, Justin Steele's had one of the most unlucky seasons you could possibly remember. His numbers across the board rank up there with some of the better pitchers in the National League, and he only has 3 wins to show for it. Shota kind of tailed off a little bit, but I still think he can give you a quality outing. Jameson Taillon's been pretty rock solid all season long. There are pieces here that can get you through a short playoff series. It's all just going to come down to wins, and that's something that Chicago Cubs have struggled with all season long. But you just have to get in this year. I'm telling you, if the Chicago Cubs get in the playoffs, I think there is an element of, depending on who they play, it could be a little bit of an all bets off. I know that is a little bit on the optimistic side, but is the caveat is saying is if they get in. Getting in is going to be quite a task, and I think in these next 12 to 13 games, you are going to find out whether the Chicago Cubs team is going to be playing in October or not, because it's not going to come down to late September. It has to happen right now to put them in position. So if you haven't been watching the Cubs lately, you want to take 2 more weeks off and then come back in, go for it. Or if you want to hop in right now, now is a great time, because I think the Chicago Cubs can possibly make a move, and the teams that they're playing indicate it that way. Before I get out of here really quick, bon voyage to Hector Neris, a guy who, oh my gosh, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, but I just don't think he was made for this team at this time. We can make a great argument of whether they got rid of him to help kind of avoid some of the luxury tax punitive nature of his salary, because if he got to a certain amount of appearances, I believe it was 60 by the end of the season, his contract would immediately vest to $9 million for next year. There was no way the Chicago Cubs were going to do that. So you can make a case if you want to that it was contract influence. I don't think so. I think it was completely performance influenced. And I have to tell you that I think Hector Neris, unfortunately, probably a nice dude, is the second worst Chicago Cubs closer of all time. And I'm going to give you my rankings to end the show. Here we go. I have at number 7, Rick Aguilera. Rick Aguilera was a great closer for the Minnesota Twins for many years. We got him a little bit later in his career. He was fine at times. He didn't really have plus stuff, but it didn't exactly quite work out the way that we wanted to. In the end, it was kind of more of a big name than a big addition. Rick Aguilera comes in at number 7. Number 6, this one's kind of a sneaky one because the Cubs were terrible. Terry Adams, in 1997, in 74 innings pitched, he allowed 91 hits in 74 innings. He walked 40 guys in 74 innings. Of course, he did strike out 64 people in that span, but man, oh man, at least 130 base runners in 7 innings. It's almost 2 base runners an inning. That is pretty bad. Number 5, Mel Rojas. I don't need to explain it with stats. It was a problem from the beginning. They never should have done it. They gave him way too much money. It was a dumpster fire from the very beginning. He's number 5. I don't need to quantify it with an answer. We all know Mel Rojas was not good for the Chicago Cubs as a closer. Number 4, more of a recent one, Craig Kimbrell, 2019. Man, oh man, this was tough. Can you hindsight look back and say, man, if they had gotten him into the system in spring training, he got a full run at it. They gave him the money when he wanted to. Would he have been okay? Maybe. We all remember the previous season for Boston. That dude was a high wire act. He started losing his control. It looked really difficult at the time. But then in 2019, Craig Kimbrell, when they signed him in the middle of the season, they thought, man, maybe this is the jump start towards the very, very tail end here of the Joe Madden era, of that Cubby core really being a threat in the National League. Craig Kimbrell was kind of that flare in the air to try and jumpstart that team, and man, it just didn't work out. 21 2/3 innings, 21 hits, 9 home runs in 21 innings. That's almost impossible. He did have 30 Ks in that 21 innings, but he also walked 13 guys. That's 34 base runners in 21 2/3 innings. And don't forget, he gave up home runs along the way, which means that's a lot of runs coming in for Craig Kimbrell in number 4. Number 3, worst Cubs closer of all time since 1990, Kevin Gregg, 2009. This was unfortunate. This was during the Lou Piniella era. We're getting him from the Marlins, thinking that this would be a positive move. He did have a good fastball, but it was straight as an arrow. 68 innings pitched, 60 hits, 71 Ks, 30 walks, 7 wild pitches, 3 hit by pitch, 13 home runs allowed. 13, again, that is a lot. That is a huge number right there. That is over 30 if he was a starter. And just think about it, 7 wild pitches and 3 hit by pitch. The control just wasn't there. And then when he did get the control, he was serving up home runs. That was pretty tough. Coming in at number 2, worst closer in Cubs history since 1990, Hector Neris. That's right, folks. He's made it all the way up to number 2. Final stat line after being DFA'd by the Chicago Cubs this week: 44 innings pitched, 41 hits, 26 walks, 3 balks, 70 runners allowed, and 44 innings pitched. He walks away with a whip, which is walks and hits per innings pitched at 1.523. For those of you who aren't familiar, that is awful. You honestly really want any number under 1.2. He's at 1.523 and walks away with a walks per 9 innings of 5.3. We all know the story. The dude could not get through a clean inning to save his life. He put runners on base as if it was a sport to him. And unfortunately, he got burned way too many times. 5 blown saves in 22 chances. It was just tough. And for a team that honestly really could have used a steady closing presence this year, and I talked all about this stretch that's coming up, that they need to win some games. If you had just given me a couple of those wins back from all the blown saves Neris and the bullpen had this year, you wouldn't even be having this conversation, and you'd be thinking about the Chicago Cubs in a completely different light right now. And unfortunately, that's what makes Hector Neris, in my opinion, for the agita, for the heartburn, for the frustration, I think he's the number 2 worst closer in Cubs history since 1990. And finally, number 1, I'm making an exception here. This is the number 1 season, the worst closer in Cubs history per season. Because in 1998, this dude was absolutely incredible. We loved him. You know him. I know him. R.I.P. the shooter, Rod Beck. Rod Beck, who was amazing in 1998, who shut the door down on 50-plus saves in 1999, absolutely lost his game. And it was tough to watch. Lost his closer role after only 30 innings pitched. He had 41 hits allowed, 13 walks, only 13 strikeouts in 30 innings pitched. He was getting knocked around like crazy and couldn't find the strike zone. It was a rough end. We'll always remember the good times, but unfortunately, when I looked up the stats, I had to remind myself that after that great 1998 year, everything fell apart. Kerry Wood got hurt. Rod Beck was awful, and the team went right back to where it was. In the Cubs era that it was just a bad franchise, a bad team, losing a lot of games. And unfortunately, Rod Beck, that season, put together the worst Cubs closer season of the last 30 years. That's going to do it for the show here. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. I really appreciate it. Right here on WLS AM 890. I am here every single Saturday from 8 to 9 p.m. I am Joey Christopoulos. You can follow me at Joey Sports Guy. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be well, be safe, please be good to each other. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the listen. Go enjoy your Saturday night, Chicago, and I will talk to you next week.